everybody, as Alex said, my name is John Henry Scherck, and today we're going to be talking about mapping your purchase journey to content and keywords for B2B SaaS. Really just a little bit about growth plays. I'm based in Los Angeles, but the company's remote, and we work with emerging and established B2B software companies, everything from like Series A to IPO. And primarily work with them on mapping their entire purchase journey to actual pieces of content and keywords. So we're going to be out sort of a quick and dirty crash course process to how we approach this. Let me just change my layout here. Awesome. And apologies, 1 second as I figure this out. Here we go. All right, so before we can talk about really how to map your purchase journey to content and keywords, we need to talk about the sales model that you're supporting. I think just about everybody on this call is going to be familiar with top-down sales, where you're essentially like doing outbound email, outbound calling, and getting people into meetings. And kind of flipping it on its head right now is product-led growth. So instead of like a sales-led motion leading growth for the company, it's a product-led motion. And it's really like an end-user focused growth model that relies on the product itself to be what drives customer acquisition and what actually gets people to start paying for the product and what causes expansion so that other folks start inviting other users into the product and onto their account. And again, like this is really different from that top-down software sales, like even like pre-SaaS, when you had to sell into a CIO to get an on-prem installation of your software. It was much more expensive and it was a much longer sales process. And then we've had sort of like the cloud era or like the exec era where you were selling into a department head. So you could sell into like a VP of marketing or a VP of sales or a VP of customer support. And you didn't need the CIO to install the software because the server wasn't something that you had to handle anymore, but it was still fairly expensive. And now we're going to this like end user growth focused era or this product led growth era where folks are opting into the product on their own and buying it on their own terms. And that's real different from having like a software product essentially forced down upon you from management and hoping that the implementation goes well. So the way the product led growth works, it's pretty different. I'll go through this quick because we don't have much time. Also, I'm doing like a longer version of this tomorrow on ClearScope's webinar in case we have to stop for time. If y'all want to catch the tail end of this, we don't get to it. But really with product-led growth, you want to design for the end user. So instead of making a product that's very good for like selling, you want to make it very like really designing for the end user of the product in mind, not just the buyer. You want to deliver value before capturing value. So you want to let people literally extract value out of your product before making them pay for it. And then you really are formulating your go-to-market strategy around your product instead of building a go-to-market strategy that's designed to get sales meetings that then lead to contracts getting signed. So it's just like a totally different motion. It's much more data-driven. It's much more growth-focused with the product actually like spreading out. Some good examples of this are like Asana and Notion and Slack. Those are all very popular product-led growth companies. And the way that this works in action is you have like one user, let's call her Jane. She downloads, in this case, it's called Slack. She downloads Slack. You're not going to use Slack alone because it's a collaborative tool. You're not just going to chat with yourself. So Jane invites her team, and then Jane's team and Jane, they start inviting other people to start collaborating in Slack. And pretty soon everyone is adopting and using and liking Slack. And then you're going to start hitting limits. And the team says, hey, to the executive, can we please buy this product? We like it. And for an executive, that's a really safe decision because the product's already been adopted. They're not going to have to do a rollout and hope it goes well. The product's already pretty much rolled out. They're just lacking some features and they're hitting some limits. So now that we've level set on sort of like product-led growth and top-down sales, I want to talk about content-led SEO and product-led SEO. And I hate how jumbled the words are. There's a ton of jargon in SEO, but just stick with me here. Content-led SEO is a function of content marketing. It's very intent like marketing-focused action. It maps the buyer journey to content and keywords, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And you use that content as a platform for thought leadership and product marketing and demand gen account creation. You don't just like rank the page and then assume that the business, like the website's going to work as a machine that then funnels down the leads. Like, yes, there can be pop-ups and CTAs and chat and whatnot, but really like the content itself is actual product marketing, is thought leadership exercise, and does incorporate into demand gen assets. And some examples of folks that do this really effectively are Shopify. They just have a super elite team and rank for everything. Zendesk, if you're looking up anything around like customer support, customer service, help desk, you're going to find Zendesk. Atlassian, pretty much the entire product life cycles map there, from like managing projects or products and like how to manage like actual like sprints and product and like the actual individual building of the product, get product requirements. The whole life cycle is really there on the Atlassian website. HubSpot, everything related to sales, marketing, product support, they've got mapped out. Smart Sheet, pretty much any business function that can happen inside of a spreadsheet, any template that you need that have a page for it. And people had to go through and individually create all of those pages. They weren't automatically generated. And this is totally different from product-led SEO, which I have a ton of respect for. It's not something that I do at all or that Growth Plays does. This is more of like a function of the product. It's technical and scalable by nature. You're typically using like you're typically incorporating a high volume of pages, and your product or your users really end up creating that content for you. So like Indeed, every time there's a new job uploaded to Indeed, that's a new URL, and that URL gets filtered onto various category pages for different types of jobs and different types of pay levels. G2 Crowd does the same thing with reviews. SlideShare does the same thing with slide decks. When you upload a slide deck, there's various category pages it'll go into. Same with Liquid Space, which is like rental office by the hour. So like as folks use the product and upload information, that creates new pages. Where with content-led SEO, the marketing team and like the product marketing team is primarily responsible for that content generation. So here's why product-led growth is a really good match for content-led SEO. I stole this graphic from Intrinsic, but it's a great visualization. You can see right here, we have 3 channels, really: content, paid, and other. Content being like a primary driver of visits to the website. And because you can get into the product with little to no friction, getting visits to the website is like a primary growth driver. So the marketing team's responsible for that, and then converting those folks. And from there, sales can take over, product can nurture the user inside of the product. And once like the deal is done or the sales starts getting talked about, customer success can step in. So content is just like a primary growth driver for product-led growth, because content is all about opting in, solving for your jobs to be done. And the product, because it doesn't require much, if it helps you solve for that job to be done, it's a very natural sign up with no risk or need from you to start going. So the top-down model, which has a lot of validity, like top-down sales is not going away. If you need to do a lot of data collection, if there's just like a huge rollout that's involved, if it's like an AI tool that needs to build a model, like it's not going to make sense to have a freemium tool. But the thing that you need to understand about that top-down sales model is that it adds friction, and you're going to be competing with folks in the search results who have little to no friction. So it's your job as a marketer, if you're doing top-down SaaS sales, to reduce friction as much as possible in order to create those qualified leads. So if you're not doing top down, if you can use search as a low friction entry point into your product, you should absolutely go for it. I think some good examples of this are like Airtable with templates, or Smartsheet, which I mentioned earlier, doing like 400K visits a month on template keywords. Every single one of those pages offers the ability to shoot that template into the product and start getting going with no cost. But this isn't just for things that can necessarily create users. You can also create, or it's not just for like templates. You can use examples and process guides. Those also work great. It's something that I produced when I was at DocSend. If you go look it up, it's dead. They got acquired by Dropbox, and I don't think they wanted to move all these case studies over for various reasons. But basically, we went to Salesforce, grabbed an account list, and then appended file type PDF. So we only got PDFs in search, and then the word case study. So we scraped like 20 results that either featured target accounts and case studies or were created by target accounts. And we categorized them all and built little cards that you could basically click over. And that shot you into the DocSend product. It didn't make you create an account, but it got you to see what DocSend was like from an end user perspective and how effortless it was, and that you didn't need to download like a weighty PDF. And it just like a much better experience than looking at a PDF in your browser. So really using content as a way to like either send people into the product or get them to experience the product in some way. But if you can't do that, if you can't ungate the product, if you can't give a preview, you have to educate your buyers on how to buy, because that's the only other way you can create a low friction experience. So product-led growth, it has a natural advantage in search, but top-down SaaS can still compete, but it has to compete by being that source of education. So I want to look at 2 companies, one doing this well, one doing it not so well, and then we'll get to another example. We can see connect Instapage to Google Sheets. You got Zapier running up front, ranking up top, and it says in the title tag, connect your Instapage to Google Sheet integration. It's truncated, but it's supposed to say in 2 minutes. So like very low requirement, and it's and there's no cost to get started. When you land on the page, it shows you specific actions you can take with the product. It says connect in minutes, instant sign up. It very much is clear, like we can solve for your job to be done right now. So if you look at position 6 for the same query, they're bouncing around all over the place. You can see Tray.io with Google Sheets and Instapage integration and automation. And when you land on the page, there's actually not much information about how these integrations work. And you can have one of 3 actions. You can take an on-demand demo, you can sign up for a free trial, or you can schedule a one-on-one live demo. And if you actually try and do a free trial, it's not a free trial. You can do a trial request. So once again, like adding friction. And then they have all these other questions, like what services are you trying to integrate, and how would you like these systems integrated, and how technical are you on a scale of 1 to 5? And I don't know how to answer the last question, because I have no context for that. And then also just like the form itself is weird here. Like these are complicated questions and there's not a lot of space to write. I just think this is poorly done. It's probably because they don't want to drive bad leads, but at the same time, they're creating a bad space for search. And if they can't be the place for everyone to solve for their job to be done, they should be mapping the market and helping people find the right solution for them. So here's an example from Bright Pearl. This page doesn't rank. It's an older example. It's just, I really like what they do. I should look into why they're not ranking so well, but this is intended to rank for inventory management software. And instead of just being some direct response landing page that asks for the lead and doesn't really help people understand the market, it is a like 3,000 word article that fully maps the market and even goes over various solutions in the market that you may be a better fit for. So if you can't be the place where people can solve for their job to be done, if you can't provide instant gratification by getting people into the product, you've got to be the place for deep product education that people can learn from and trust and build a consideration set with. So now that we've level set on like how to basically think about this and product-led growth versus top-down sales and the different types of experiences you need to create, I want to talk about how to actually start mapping the purchase journey. So the very first move should be making sure that your branded search is covered. This is an example from Zendesk right here. And you can see things like Zendesk pricing and Zendesk features. Like, yes, you should have a page for Zendesk features. If you don't, a company like G2 Crowd or Software Advice or Trust Radius is going to take that ranking from you. And an example of pricing, I've worked with some upmarket companies that do not have transparent pricing and they don't want to give it out. And then in the featured snippet, we get some article from 4 years ago. This literally just happened yesterday that gives out old static pricing that is no longer what the price is at all. And it's what people get geared around because your buyers are going to be searching for this stuff, whether you want them to or not. So yeah, like literally it's a great example of not having a pricing page because they didn't want to give it out. And some third-party site was anchoring everyone to a much lower price point than actual. So there's some brand damage that can happen here if you don't cover this stuff or just things that can complicate the sales process. These are all really easy layups to rank for. So you should create pages for all of these terms. Tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush, they're not going to have this data because they collect data on the most unsophisticated internet users out there. People who are unwittingly getting their data resold through shady Chrome extensions and free VPNs. I don't believe there's any iPhone data inside of Ahrefs. Like it's not the actual way people search, especially in like B2B SaaS in the United States. If you're working in that market, there's going to be a lot of iPhone data. So I like going off of auto suggest. I think it's a much more accurate and real-time way of how people are searching. But once you've got your brand stuff covered, that's when you want to move up to versus pages. That's the most bottom of the funnel content you can go for. These are the people that buyers are comparing you against, whether you want them to or not. I would recommend creating a page for every single company that you're seeing up in here. And then from there, though, you can't just like create a versus page and just market your product. You need to actually help people compare and figure out what the right solution for them is. So you got to perform some competitive analysis. You want to put together that list of competitors from versus auto suggest. And then add any other brands that you want to position yourself against in the future. Maybe, talk to sales, look in the CRM, and then you want to research features and benefits, various integration partners, pricing, figure out what customers are saying on review sites. And then you want to evaluate the market really through the lens of your own product. You don't want to do this analysis and have like ServiceNow or Salesforce come out on top every time because they're more feature rich and have more capabilities and like have better SLAs. You want to build this analysis for where your product is today and for where your customer is today. And the best way I like to frame this is to be biased, but honest. Like you don't want to be misleading, but at the same time, sorry, just checking for time here. You don't want to mislead anybody, but you want to help them solve for their jobs to be done, figure out the right solution for them, but you do want to tilt the scales in your favor. And then when it comes to executing, remember that these are comparisons, not just like we're better. So you need to compare, not just promote. You want to dive into features and benefits and help people understand your product while still allowing them to like skim and scan and get the feel without doing a deep read. Include testimonials from happy customers, reviews, strong product CTAs. Since this is the very bottom of the funnel, people basically have one of two solutions they want to go with, and they just need to be pushed over in one direction or the other. And be biased but honest. I think Paddle just does a really great job of going against Stripe here. Paddle is a really smart company. They do international payment processing for product-led growth, very meta for our conversation today. But you can kind of like skim and scan and get an idea of the differences on implementation, performance, growth, and compliance here. But if you want to drill down, the div can expand. You can actually go to a detail page specifically about that issue. So it allows you to not, get bogged down in the details, get a quick understanding, and then really dive in if you want to. I love that. So, and then I get asked like, is this appropriate in the enterprise? I think like as you move up market, executives get more and more hand wringing or they wring their hands more as you move up market and want to produce these pages. And I think like you should absolutely do them. The enterprise does not buy in like a wildly different way. I think the concept of the consumerization of the enterprise is 100% real. People in the enterprise want to buy just like they buy anything else, and enterprise transactions are starting to look more like B2C transactions. Buyers want information. They don't just want to jump into a sales cycle. They want to do this research, and they're going to be Googling around. This example from Jira Service Management is wonderful. Goes up against ServiceNow, which is a super enterprise competitor, and they straight up say like, "Hey, we're $20 a month per agent," and so a fraction of the price. And again, they allow you to skim and scan, and you can expand on any of these and get a better understanding. So like they pull data from a G2 crowd report, which I love, about how it takes 1.2 months to go live on Jira Service Management. With ServiceNow, it takes 4.5 months, so literally a third of the time. And they also point out like, hey, whatever quote you get now, that could change in the future. Like we are a no hassle renewals process. That is not what the business ServiceNow is in. And if this stuff doesn't matter for you, you may be a better fit for ServiceNow. And this page could push you to ServiceNow, but it definitely is tilted in the favor of Atlassian here. So I'm a big fan of this one. So a few takeaways. You want to appeal to the lizard brain. No one is coming in from search thinking like, I want a big, long, critical, deep read. They need to opt into that stuff. So you want to provide skimmable content that then allows people to do deep dives with product info. You want to appeal to the lizard brain, not create like genius level content, since that's not how people search. It's just, they're lazy. They want the answers provided to them. And then chat is your friend, but you got to keep it contextual. So optimize chat so it's relevant to the topic of the page. Otherwise, chat just feels like really self-serving. And this is a great example from WP Engine. It exists on a WP Engine versus Kinsta page. And it says, want to know why WP Engine is better than Kinsta? We're available to now to answer any questions. And I love that because it says like, we're ready to have the same conversation that you are right now. We know what you're thinking about, and we can help you come to the right decision. I was an early employee at WP Engine. I can say like chat literally did change the business. We staffed a chat team in like a matter of a quarter once we figured out how valuable it was. And it became a primary daily KPI for growth. And I think like just a side note, nothing to do with SEO, but if you are working in marketing and you are selling something that has some friction, like with WP Engine, you have to sign up, you have to put in your credit card, and then you have to migrate a site, which takes some time and is difficult. That is some friction. Chat is a way to reduce friction. So you can answer people's questions. You can help them get to the right tutorials. You don't just like opt in and sell them. You let them know that they're at the right place for them. So even if you can't get away with actual versus pages, I recommend getting away with what you can. This is a page from Workday. It's clearly calling out Oracle, but it's not using that word. I'm guessing someone at Workday wanted to create this, and this is as far as they could get. But this is still valuable. Like, yes, these pages create SEO traffic, but even after people convert, using like product analytics tools like Heap, which can tie the visitor to the Salesforce record, we can see Salesforce accounts essentially going back to these pages even after a demo. And as they're being an internal champion and building the business case, they refer to these pages to make the business case internally of why they need to go with one product or the other. So these have value outside of just SEO. Whatever you can get away with, they will, like, no one will come to these pages unless they're looking to buy. These are super valuable pages to create, even if legally you can't get away with it. And then once you have all those pages, I recommend creating a hub page for your versus content and ranking that hub for brand name alternatives and competitors. Because even if people are looking at competitors, doesn't mean they're moving away from you necessarily. They're just trying to figure out maybe if they should. So I like having this entire thing kind of maps the market. It's hard to capture the essence of like a long form page, but after these tables that compare all the main players, there's links to all the versus pages in here. And then that lives in the footer and gets it some link equity. And that enables them to rank fairly well from there. I know we're running low on time. So real quickly, just one step up the funnel from starting at the bottom, I want to go to alternatives pages. So what you should do is take that list of competitors from versus AutoSuggest and then talk to sales, look in the CRM and figure out more competitors, but then basically Google the brand name of the competitor, alternatives, and competitors, and see what's ranking, and you want to mimic what's working. For things that are like lower complexity, like Podia is a great example. It's not the most complex product. It's an amazing platform. It's very powerful, but like it's not, like DevOps automation tooling. So for them, like a short form page makes a lot of sense, but for anything that's more complex, longer form content might be what people want. It really depends if what people are ready to buy and product market fit, and if there's just like inherent demand for purchasing the product, or if it's more about education. Inherent demand for purchase in the market, or purchase intent in the market. But basically you want to figure out if you want to do short form or long form here. And we can see that for Expensify alternatives, the top ranking short form page is at number 8 with File HQ at the very bottom. So like long form is clearly the move here, a long form buyer's guide. And even if we go to the singular alternative, we still see that long form buyer's guides rank above sort of the direct response file HQ page. So I mean, there's benefits of having a direct response page being at number 3, but I would rather have map the market and help people build their consideration set at number 1 and have strong CTAs in that buyer's guide. I think short form thinner pages are just, there's more variables in there that make them harder to rank. So I tend to skew towards long form content. And then, but then not everyone's going to go for that. So a good rule of thumb is like, if you're an up and comer and you don't have a ton of link equity and you're not as well known of a brand, building a buyer's guide that maps the market is going to be better for SEO. And if you're really established, you can pull off those DR pages like a HubSpot or a Zendesk or a Freshworks. Those can work. But this example right here is exactly what you don't want to be doing. And that's why I was thinking about getting rid of it, but I thought I'd call it out. This doesn't actually help you compare Zendesk to Freshworks. It just says Freshworks makes it easier and pitches the Freshworks platform. It's not a good page because it doesn't actually help you solve for your job to be done. It just promotes a singular product. So unless you are established or enterprise or frictionless, comprehensiveness is going to win on alternative pages. Most buyers researching software aren't just looking to sign up. They're looking to be informed or to instantly execute like you can with a Zapier landing page. If your brand is strong enough to convert prospects on name alone, like a HubSpot or a Shopify, even if you are top-down sales, test out DR SEO pages on alternatives. And if you're relatively new on the scene, if you have less links than the competition, or most everyone searching for the alternative won't be a fit, long form is the move. A good example for this, Gorgeous. It is a help desk for Shopify sites. They would love to rank for like Zendesk alternative, but a fraction of the people searching for Zendesk alternative are going to be on Shopify. So it's not appropriate for them to have a DR page that ranks for Zendesk alternative. They need to build a buyer's guide that really maps all the various alternatives for Zendesk and helps the Shopify folks see the right alternative for them. And they can, put calls to action to that section at the top of the page, really make it appeal to and structured for folks on Shopify, but it needs to work for everybody or it's going to be a bad result in search that has a high bounce rate and it won't rank for long. So for long form content, this is the protocol I like to use. This is an example from Heap. They're a customer of ours. We've been working with them for like a year now, even actually a little bit longer, but this is a page for alternatives to Google Analytics and GA360. First thing you want to do is introduce the incumbent, and then in a section, call out the big problem. You can say like the big problem, Google Analytics, incomplete data. There's a lot of sampling. There's a lot of limitations. And then you want to introduce yourself as the first alternative and really talk about how you fill all the gaps in their product. But you want to include everyone else as well and help people understand what the right solution for them is. And I think we only have like 2 minutes, so I'm going to call it there. I'm sorry I didn't get through the rest of this. If you want to discuss the middle of the funnel and the top of the funnel, I'm going to be covering this on ClearScope's webinar tomorrow. Apologies for running a little long here, though. Are we good to take over, Alex?
Yeah, that was awesome. Also highly relatable because I worked at HubSpot on freemium acquisition on a lot of the content plays that brought us closer to the product, I guess. So I've seen the utility in a lot of this and also how opening the product gates can really unlock a lot of opportunity for content. Mm-hmm. Also, I just want to note on that last point you were making on Zendesk alternatives, I'm pretty sure they created a page or website called zendeskalternative.com. And it was like this alt rock band. They had like a whole photo shoot and a couple songs. It's hilarious.
I thought that was great too. It's interesting because like their products matured so much since then that like back in the day, I think when that came out, they were competing with like, basically like email inbox type ticketing solutions. And now they compete with like much more mature solutions. And so it's interesting. Like, I wonder if that's even like, not to sound like a narc, but I think like, I don't know if like you're selling against ServiceNow. I don't know if I want them finding like that old stuff anymore. I don't know if it's like as appropriate for where the company is today. It was super cool. It was very creative. And I think like taking up that search result and just being like, oh, that's a brand I can relate with makes a lot of sense. I think it was a little edgy, if I remember correctly. Like it has some swearing in it and stuff.
Yeah, so, it was definitely scrappy, creative kind of startup move.
It makes sense. I mean, they've come such a long way. Same with HubSpot. So it's interesting to see. But yeah, I think like, and I'll just say like, when it comes to like creating pipeline out of SEO content, people who are typing in versus and alternatives, and I know that's all we got to today, but like those are people who are ready to buy. If you're typing in like expense management software, you still have so much research to do to build a consideration set to be able to Google those versus things. So that's why I typically recommend starting with versus and alternative content, because that's people who are like, I am solution seeking and I know what I want. I just know I don't want that. So help me find the right solution for me, as opposed to like, man, I one day hope to be using, workflow automation software. What's that like? Like there's a there's not even necessarily an intent to buy when you're researching that stuff. It can be aspirational. Like one day we hope to have, continuous deployment, but we're not there yet. So that's why I really like the alternatives and the things that are basically comparison shopping to start, because that's a way to get pipeline in the door pretty much immediately and prove the value for SEO as you go for some of the more longer term plays.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, and sounds like this may be the answer to it. But some of these terms are quite competitive as well. Like best CRM or something like that, the category terms. So I would assume that in those cases, if you're a smaller competitor, you may also want to like look to these alternative terms. Like for best CRM, for instance, I don't think Salesforce is probably going to write a Salesforce alternatives article. So you may actually have some less competition for those terms as well.
For sure. Yeah. I think like they are easier terms to go for. Granted, like Trust Radius and G2 Crowd spin up those pages, like, because it is their job. But it's, I do think it is, especially if you can make something that's like usable and helpful. One company we worked with at Spoke has a gigantic guide to help desk alternatives or Zendesk alternatives for like IT support. And that thing is just massive. And it's like, if you really are, it's better than a Gartner report. Like the people who, and not to knock G2 Crowd, but like, because they do a good job, but like no one who creates those pages has deep expertise in the product. So if you can create an alternative buyer's guide that really maps the market effectively from someone who's worked in it for years, that is going to be like one of the best pieces of content that people can use to make a purchase decision. Whereas like the other site you're going against, they're going to slap it together and hope to rank and hope to convert that traffic. So putting in a little effort there can go a long way, especially if you bring in some subject matter experts.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a really good question. How do you level up your content writers to be better at product positioning? When, where, and how to product position in the content? Do you have a framework? What does it look like?
Yeah, so this is a tough question. And I think like, honestly, a lot of the work that we do at Growth Plays is we work with product marketers to be able to execute on SEO rather than trying to train general copywriters to be able to do this stuff. Because it's, writing about like feature flagging for JavaScript is a complicated process. You're going to lack authenticity. So like really getting subject matter experts involved in the get-go is what I go for. But, when I worked at WP Engine, I think like we did some great content, but it didn't always have a lot of business acumen in it. So the 4 prongs I like to have every writer answer before they start a piece of content is: how will you use this for thought leadership? How will you use this for product marketing? How will you use it for demand generation? And where will the CTA go for account creation or demo request? So making sure that they cover all 4 of those prongs in an article is the framework that we use. It's not rocket science. And generally like mapping the market and speaking about it with authority is a framework for thought leadership. Another way to think about it is like if you're selling HR software, but really like what you're actually trying to sell is like cultural transformation, making your article as a thought leadership, like the thought leadership angle could be introducing the idea of like building a high performance culture and taking it away from whatever software category you're going for. So it's more aligned to your brand values, but having writers actually think through the business purpose of the content before they start drafting it has been a process or a framework that I've adopted, because I think there can be kind of a disconnect between content marketing and product marketing as the company grows, because they have different KPIs and their incentives aren't always aligned. So instilling frameworks in the process that bring in some of that product marketing knowledge is what I try and do with writers. But again, like if the content is sophisticated and requires deep product knowledge, it shouldn't have someone who doesn't have that deep product knowledge writing the content. An SME needs to like at least outline it or drop in a Loom video into like whatever project management tool you're using about like, here's the 5 things I wish customers knew before they got on a call about this topic. If you can get SMEs to collaborate with you, that's one way to go about it. But ideally, like for anything technical or anything that's core to your brand, or if like you're trying to rank for like what is the category that we're building, you should have some authoritative expert, whatever the EAT acronym is, you should have that going on in your content as well, and the people who write it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. That's how we try to do it at HubSpot for a lot of the content involving like alternatives or this versus that. We would try to work with the product marketing team and at least get like product blurbs so we would know kind of what copy to put into these things. But it is difficult, right? Because of the different goals. Just a quick question. When you were at WP Engine, did you work here in Austin?
I flew down to Austin like every 3 or 4 weeks, and WP Engine had like a little apartment for us back then. And it was still like a 150 person company. But yeah, I would spend a ton of time in Austin. I ate a lot of Torchy's tacos.
That's awesome. Yeah. Some people think they're too good for Torchy's tacos. I feel like it's one of those things that as soon as it got mainstream, people started to talk smack about it. I still love Torchy's. I live right next to one. Go there all
No,
the time.
no, that's me spreading misinformation to make the line shorter.
The whole don't move to Austin propaganda. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Oh man, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. This is incredible. Also, I want to say before we go and I do the closeout that people should definitely check you out on ClearScope's podcast. I was just talking to Bernard this weekend. We did a poker game at his place, and he's like, "Hey, man, we both have John Henry on the webinar this week. So a longer version of what you talked about today would be incredible. So highly recommend that one."
Thank you so much.
For sure. All right. So I don't have much in conclusion. Thanks everyone for attending. This was Office